everybody, and welcome to Grimwit with Dimwits. I'm T.
And I'm Blondie.
Good morning, Miss Blondie. How you doing today?
That was a little delay.
It was. I wasn't sure what I was going to say, to be quite honest with you.
Well, I don't want to say it showed, but it showed.
My lack of professionalism.
You get an A+ for that today.
It's like as soon as I said what I knew I had to say, I was like, what else am I going to say?
Well, I am fine. How are you? You should be very relaxed.
I should be.
One would always hope.
Yeah. So what Blondie's referring to is I'm currently on vacation, not too far from home. I'm only in Carlsbad, which is part of San Diego, California. But yeah, it's been a little bit of work being out here. It's like I got a lot to do and I'm not in my cozy little comfortable home and everything's not very convenient right now.
You don't understand the concept of vacation then, do you?
No, I'm going through some stuff right now for the last couple of months that has been stressing me the heck out. And I am having to jump through quite a few hoops and cross some T's and dot some I's. And it's just been a little bit of a challenge for me. I even had to go during this vacation on a 6-hour round trip just to drop some paperwork off. And I was there probably all of 5 minutes. Oh, and I had to dress nice for it too.
Isn't that how it always works? All the preparation and the driving and, you can almost do a drive-by.
Exactly. Like if I'm going to be there 5 minutes, can I come in my jammies? Just toss everything you need at you and keep going. Let's make it convenient for the people too, It's not all about you guys.
I don't know if they really want to see you in your jammies.
Oh, yeah, that could have made a difference.
I wholeheartedly agree.
The paperwork would have been stamped rejected.
Hell no.
Right. Hell to the no.
So at least are you enjoying your vacation while you're there and not driving?
Oh, that's another story. So yeah, I'm just full of wines this week. You would think I'd be drunk. I'm so full of wine. But no.
Well, you're not doing it right then.
No, wrong wine. But no, it's been a challenging week being here for other reasons also, because the person I'm here with, and I'm not going to mention any names, has had a cough most of this week. And poor thing, just been really, really down. I mean, I feel bad for him, but yeah, it's kind of put a little bit of a damper on our vacation.
Well, I have to admit that person that will go unnamed.
Yes, nobody knows nobody knows who that is.
Right. I do adore him. He did a little favor for me while you were on vacation, although I think it was a little favor for him too, because that's what he loves to do. But
yes, he does.
So what I'm talking about is this episode is about, I'll just say right now, is about Marvin Gaye. And of course I wanted to use music and I can't. And since that unnamed person has such a wonderful voice, he actually recorded a few things for me that you'll hear in this episode. So let's give him some props.
Yeah, my I can't talk today. I don't know what my problem is. I cannot talk today. And it's sad because I don't know why I can't get my thoughts together today, but I am looking out my balcony right at the ocean with a beautiful windmill right in front of me. So it's a little distracting.
I guess. So basically, your body is not on vacation, but your brain is?
Isn't that how I always live my life?
Usually it's the other way around.
Oh, yeah. True. I'm really messed up this week. So I'm excited to hear about this Marvin Gaye story. What are you going to be talking about?
I wanted to do an episode on Marvin Gaye because I was reading about him and there's a lot more about him that I didn't realize.
Look at our Weta go.
Look at me go. If you don't recognize a name, you definitely will recognize some of his songs. Sexual Healing, I heard it through the grapevine. And of course, a lot of people's favorite, Let's Get It On.
You didn't say that right.
Woo, let's get it on.
Oh my gosh. And so while I was writing this, I was listening to some of his music. and Gotta Give It Up came on, which I actually love because it's in a lot of movies. Had no idea that was a Marvin Gaye song.
Yeah, that one I definitely knew was Marvin Gaye song. It's a good one. It's a, kind of
It
got a
is,
fast pace.
we really weren't around at the height of his career, so I didn't realize how much of a tormented soul he was and what he went through in his life. His life was literally the epitome of a roller coaster life.
And I didn't know a lot about him, but the little bit that I do know, yeah, it was very sad. And he did seem very tormented with so many things that happened to him in his life.
He was. So if you're ready, you want to do this?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Let's get our grim on. Marvin Pence Gaye Jr. was born on April 2nd, 1939 in Washington, D.C., to Marvin Pence Gaye Sr., who was a preacher, and Alberta Gaye, who was a domestic worker. Marvin was the second oldest of four. He had a brother named Frankie and two sisters named Jean and Ziola.
I'm totally digging the name Ziola, and the name Pence is pretty interesting as well.
Marvin's father was a very strict man, a man that everyone tried to win his approval. Marvin defied his father and hated his ideals, but in reality, all he ever really wanted from his father was to be loved. His mother, on the other hand, was the person that always meant unconditional love to him.
It's sad to say, but during that time, this happened more often than not, with like the fathers being the king of the castle mentality and the mother being the buffer between her overbearing husband and their kids. It's sad, but that's kind of how it was for a lot of people back in the day.
It was. Even us coming up, my father personally, I love the man, but he was raised in the Midwest, and there was a very strict household. You didn't cuss. There were certain things that you just did. Dinner was on the table at a certain time. It was the times.
Your father was the epitome of old school, king of his castle. And I respected him immensely. I mean, you know what you were getting every day of the year. He was a wonderful, wonderful guy.
He was. He's sorely missed, believe me.
Yeah. Everything he did was out of love.
Absolutely. So Marvin's sister, Jean, said about growing up with her father, quote, "Father was a man of spare the rod, spoil the child, and he never spared the rod. He was very, very, very strict, so we were all punished," end quote. When their father would hand out punishments, they needed to be in their underwear. He would say that the clothing got in the way. Their father forced his will through violence. He would say to them as children not to raise their voice to him or strike him, that he brought them into this world, that he can take them out. The Gaye children knew that it was a serious threat. That must have been a thing, because I remember hearing that more than once. And I remember a comedian saying that, "I brought you into this world, I can take you out and make another one just like you."
I've heard that many times even today, but I'd never heard the make another one just like you part. And, it would be funny if some parents weren't totally serious about it.
I can imagine. Marvin recalled, quote, "Living with father was something like living with a king, a very peculiar, changeable, cruel, and all-powerful king," end quote.
I'm not getting that he meant that as a compliment, though.
When I watched the documentary on it, he seemed very serious when he said that.
Yeah. Even just saying that, and like I could say it and you can say it and it would be kind of funny, but coming from someone as tormented as him, I definitely don't think it was a compliment.
Not at all. His childhood was a daily torment full of pain and confusion. His salvation was music. Wanting to please his father, Marvin began singing in the church at age 5. He was praised and people thought he was amazing.
Can you imagine a 5-year-old Marvin Gaye? I'm sure even at 5 years old, he was amazing.
He had an incredible voice. Marvin realized early on that his voice would be his ticket out of his father's house, and in his teens he began to sing for money. It angered his father. He felt it was the devil's music, but Marvin's mother supported and encouraged him. Quote, "I had learned from experience that my fight to win love would always be accompanied by pain. The punishment and guilt that Father put upon us was reflected in our church, where my father was a preacher. a mix of Jewish Orthodox severity and Black Pentecostal joy. I understood that in my life the pleasures of the devil were going to give the joys of God some mighty stiff competition, end quote, said Marvin. With all of this in mind, Marvin felt that we have two sets of gods in us, and we have to decide which we are going to serve.
Wow, that's a really powerful statement.
He really did have the way of grasping how to say things to make them make sense. That's probably why he was such a great writer.
Well, he was very relatable in his, vulnerability.
That is one thing that he did say, that during his life, anything that was going on in his life, that's what he was writing about in his songs.
Right.
Besides being a very strict, controlling, and overbearing man, Marvin's father also had a feminine side and was very flamboyant. He would put on women's clothing and shoes, then waltz around the house. Marvin recalled, quote, "Father liked to wear women's clothing. It may have been just to embarrass me, but there were times his hair was long and curled, and he seemed to show the world his girlish side of himself," end quote. Seeing his father as a charismatic preacher and also as a cross-dresser was a huge source of confusion for Marvin.
I'm pretty open-minded, but yeah, that would be terribly confusing, especially during that time, because people were not like living in two opposite ends of the spectrum like this and acting like it was normal. At that time, most people would have hidden one side or the other. And as a preacher, his words aren't matching his actions.
He just had his mindset, and that's just the way it was going to be.
But when you say he waltzed around flamboyantly, it's like he was proud of being a cross-dresser, and that's just something that wasn't accepted back then.
And I agree, and it's funny you say, walking around proud, because there was a quote in there in everything that I was reading. Somebody said he was proud of it. But maybe he just felt like he was above it all. It didn't matter. This is who I am, and I'm a preacher, and deal with it.
And, I would respect him if that was it. If he was just saying, hey, this is me, I have two sides to me, and love it or leave it, I would totally respect that. I think the problem I'm having with him is that none of his children can have two sides, only him.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the hypocritical part of it,
In 1956, at age 17, wanting to escape his father and his terrible home life, Marvin enlisted in the Air Force with dreams of becoming a pilot, although he was scared of flying.
Well, that's interesting.
You'd think that you wouldn't want to be a pilot if you're scared of flying.
Right?
Marvin said, quote, "I was sick to death of my father's household. I had to get out. Besides, I didn't have the concentration to make it through high school. I was afraid of failing. I knew I couldn't live up to father's standards," end quote. His ideas of the military were shattered when he ended up peeling potatoes for numerous bases. He went in with the attitude that he wanted to learn how to fly, so this was a dash to his idealistic dream. He didn't like the regimen and the strict rules, so he started acting crazy to convince them that he had some form of mental illness. He was eventually honorably discharged. He did drop out of high school, so he wouldn't have been able to take any pilot training anyway.
So they honorably discharged him after his years of service were completed?
Well, he basically started acting crazy, and they said, okay, well, he has some type of mental illness. You couldn't discharge them dishonorably just because he has an illness.
Oh, got it. Okay. But man, at still such a young age, Marvin's life has been excessively unstable so far. Like, there's no foundation for this poor guy.
And it gets worse, sad to say. Continuing to work on his singing, Marvin joined the Moonglows in 1959. One of the members of the Moonglows was Harvey Fuqua. After the Moonglows broke up, Harvey took Marvin to Detroit to meet Berry Gordy. Marvin apparently sang at a holiday party in front of Gordy in December 1960. Gordy saw a lot of potential.
What a huge break for him to meet Berry Gordy when he was only like 21 years old.
Right? In the early 60s, Marvin signed with Berry Gordy and Motown. Motown was where all the artists wanted to be. They were unsure how to become a star, but Berry Gordy was the master and ran things with an iron fist. Marvin's father never approved of his music. He felt Marvin should be singing in the church, not the hoochie coochie music. But throughout his life, he always had his mother's blessing.
I think it's funny that his father, who's so sexually at war with his own identity, has the nerve to call Marvin's beautiful, soulful music hoochie coochie, which is actually like a sexual term for really provocative dancing.
Well, I mean, anything besides church music, I would imagine, is going to have some derogatory term as far as his father's concerned.
I wonder what music his father's waltzing around in women's clothing in. Doesn't it make you wonder? You know it's not church music. I hope it's not church music, because that would be real
distorted.
Yeah, real distorted.
Marvin Gaye's birth name spelling is Gay. Marvin actually added the E to his name for a variety of reasons, some stemming from his tumultuous relationship with his father, and Marvin being his namesake, to trying to distance himself from his father since he was described as a sexually ambiguous man. Then there's also his name being Gay, Gay, and people questioning his sexuality. He was not gay, but it bugged him that people thought he was, and being the son of a cross-dressing man was always in his head. So before his first single was released, he added the E to his name. In one of the interviews, I believe it was a friend or promoter, said that when they were talking about the word spelled Gay, he says, look in the phone book. How many people do you see that have gay, Gay, as their names? Are they all gay? That's just stupid.
Yeah, but Marvin had his own demons regarding this, so if it made him happier, why not?
I heard somewhere that Sam Cooke did the same thing. He added the E to his name.
Oh, yeah, I think you're right about that. Well, I'm sure you are if you looked it up, but I didn't even think about that.
And I don't know the reasons why, but, they can do whatever they want. It's their name.
Yep.
Marvin could literally have his pick of women, but one caught his attention, Anna Gordy. Marvin remembered, quote, the lyrics of my songs were always about what's happening in my life. Right then, I was head over heels in love with Anna Gordy, the boss's sister. She was 17 years older than I, but I wrote what I thought about her, end quote. The two dated for 3 years and got married in June of 1963.
Do you happen to know what songs were about her? No, I'm just being nosy.
Off the top of my head, I don't, but I would imagine if you checked in between 1960 and 1963, some of those songs are probably about her.
Makes sense. I'm going to look now.
Gives you something to do on your off time.
There you go.
Everyone had their opinions of Marvin and Anna's relationship, but part of it was that she reminded him of his mother, and the other part was that she was the sister of the president of the company, and that might give him more privileges.
I could see why people would think that, but maybe she was wonderful and he just really loved her. That's a possibility as well.
He did love her, but Marvin, I think, did take a little bit of advantage of being married to her.
Well, who wouldn't in his situation?
An interesting fact about Marvin Gaye was he was an amazing performer in the studio, but when it came to being on stage, he couldn't put one foot in front of the other. Biographer David Ritz said that he had performance anxiety and thought it stemmed from being insecure about himself and image. Marvin started recording duets. His first partner was Mary Wells in 1964. They made an album called Together. Mary later left Motown, and Marvin's second partner was Kim Weston. Their album was Take Two and became a huge hit, but after that, she also left Motown. Marvin had very complicated relationships with women, including his relationship with his wife Anna. He felt that she was betraying him and going behind his back, but unfortunately, this was all his own invention. He was convinced she was having an affair and would go to motels in the middle of the night and start banging on doors looking for Anna.
Oh, dang, that's a little over the top.
The song, I Heard It Through the Grapevine, was originally released by Gladys Knight and the Pips. But in 1968, Motown released Marvin's version with immediate success. But to Marvin, the song fed into his thoughts of Anna cheating. Quote, Grapevine was my number one. I believe every word of that song. It was happening to me. The doubting, the friends whispering in my ear. End quote. In an effort to help their tormented marriage and also connect with his family, they adopted a child, who they named Marvin Pence Gaye III. He's trying so hard to connect with his father. It's just heartbreaking.
It seems like it. It's truly sad.
The baby boy was born to Denise Gordy on November 17, 1965. Denise was barely 16 years old and Anna's niece. It was reported that Anna could not conceive a child and faked being pregnant in public. I thought that was interesting that she was showing that she was pregnant, kind of keeping up with appearances.
So who impregnated a 16-year-old girl? That's the bigger question. She's not even old enough for consent. Marvin didn't have anything to do with that, did he?
Well, there was speculation. I'm sure they know who the father is, but I never saw exactly who it was. But there was some speculation that it was him.
Ugh.
But that's, again, it's, I don't want to say it was definitely him because I do not know.
Yeah, that would be not okay.
Marvin Gaye III said that his father wanted domestic happiness and wanted to be a normal family and have an uncomplicated home life. But as much as he wanted that happiness, he did all he could to undermine that. Continuing with his music career, he began a partnership with Tammy Terrell in 1966. The partnership was a very successful one, and over the next 3 years, the duo produced 3 albums, until 1970 when Tammy collapsed in Marvin's arms and died of a brain tumor. After Tammy's death, Marvin sank into a deep depression. She did know she was sick, but she still continued to sing.
She and Marvin were like magic together.
I'm going to have to go back and listen to some of their songs.
Yeah.
I would imagine. 3 years, and they were very successful.
Yeah, and they just harmonized so well.
He was reluctant about having another partner. He felt that bad things happened to them. Wells and Weston left Motown, which was sort of the end of their careers, and Tammy Terrell had died. But in 1971, after being asked multiple times, he paired up with Diana Ross. They recorded only one album, Diana and Marvin. Also around this time, Marvin explored acting, wanting to be like Frank Sinatra and Elvis Presley. He had bit parts in 2 very forgettable films. The first, The Ballad of Andy Crocker, which also starred Lee Majors. It focused on the effect of the Vietnam War on veterans. The second, Chrome and Hot Leather, was about Green Berets getting revenge on a biker gang that killed one of their fiancés.
I've never heard of either one of those movies.
I did say forgettable.
You did.
I did warn you.
You did.
This was a time in Marvin's life when he looked around at the world, thinking about Tammy, and that she died a few years after Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., and Robert Kennedy were all assassinated. There was the Watts riots and the continuation of the Vietnam War. Marvin is quoted as saying, "The social violence of these years was happening all around. My own problems were burning me up. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world, my family was fighting, dying for Uncle Sam. I think it was around 1969 and 1970 when I stopped thinking so much about my erotic fantasies and I started to think about the war in Vietnam." His brother did fight in the war in Vietnam, and there were stories about after he came home that they would sit and Frankie, his brother, would tell him the stories of Vietnam and they would just sit there and cry.
Oh, I can't even imagine. I had an uncle who went as a Marine, and he came back totally different and never spoke a single word about it.
Interesting. My brother actually was in Vietnam as well, and he did have problems.
Yeah, I heard it really messed a lot of people up.
I don't remember him talking about it. Of course, I was young, but I don't remember him talking about it either.
Yeah, my uncle refused to talk about it. He just wouldn't.
Wow.
Yeah, and he was such a nice guy, such a tender heart. It really made me sad to see him come back changed.
Thinking of all the chaos in the world, Marvin wanted to write a song that would touch the souls of man. He wrote and recorded in just 10 days What's Going On. He took complete control over every aspect of the song. He knew it wasn't a typical Motown sound and wanted it done his way. He was delivering a message. He was a type of man that carried the world on his shoulders. Marvin was right. Motown hated the song, threw it in the trash, saying it wasn't good and wouldn't sell. Marvin told Motown that he wouldn't record another song unless they released it. In July 1971, it was released and it made it to the chart tops not only in R&B, but also in pop. It sold 500,000 copies on the first day. To this day, it remains a best-selling album for Gaye.
That is probably my favorite of all his songs. Hard to believe that Motown hated it so much because it really is touching.
They were doing love songs and, bouncy songs. They didn't want to do something that had serious meaning about what was going on.
And somewhat politically motivated.
Right.
But that's why it was so good, because that's what people were going through at that time.
And he always tried to relate his life to everyone that listened to his music.
Right.
It's one of the songs that you know, but may not know all the lyrics and the meaning. But David Ritz said, quote, he calls out, Father, Father.
Father, Father, we don't need to escalate. War is not the answer, for only love can conquer hate.
Marvin is really calling on God and his earthly father for his support. Father Gaye should have been proud, but the man was eaten up with envy of Marvin's album. In truth, it was a better sermon than his father ever preached, and certainly a more rewarding one. End quote. Throughout his life, Marvin was haunted by his father. All he ever really wanted, and I've said this before, was his love and approval. But this is just another instance that his father denied him.
Jealousy is such a powerful and ugly thing. I mean, to turn a father against a son is outrageous.
And at this point, his son's doing way more than he's ever done in his life. And didn't we just talk about jealousy in the last episode?
We did.
Insert shameful plug. Insert shameful plug right here.
Yeah, we did. It was all about jealousy, the stalker one. And yeah, it's a destroyer. It really is.
The next year, Marvin's wish came true. He returned home on May 1st, 1972. It was proclaimed Marvin Gaye Day in Washington, D.C. This gave Marvin the respect and recognition from his father. Marvin's sister said, quote, to be hugged by his father in public. Oh, yes. That was a wonderful thing for my father to walk up to him and say, son, I'm so proud of you. This is wonderful. You have really caused me to be very proud of you. And so that's a good thing. Very good. End quote. Some naysayers said that it was just a show because they were out in the public eye, that Marvin's father always wanted that image of a perfect family. But Marvin would have given it a shot to move past the strained relationship with his father if his father would have just done his part, that day would have been a great start. As happy as they all were, the scars from years of violence and family conflict were too deep to heal.
Marvin's a much better person than I would have been, because I wouldn't have let that hypocrite share that moment with me. No way. Call me selfish, but his dad just didn't deserve that.
All he wanted was his approval. And if his dad's there throwing his arms out, hugging him and, telling him he's proud of him, he's going to eat it up. I mean, that was his main thing in life.
It's all so superficial, though. It's so, I don't know. I mean, if it was enough for him, good for him. I certainly wouldn't have been the person to be like, oh, now you're here. Now you're showing up. Nah, not today.
That same year, Marvin started hanging out with his friends Mel Farr and Lem Barney, players for the Detroit Lions. Marvin got the idea to try out to be a wide receiver for the Lions. His brother Frank recalled Marvin saying, quote, I'd rather catch a pass and score a touchdown in Tiger Stadium than rack up another gold record, end quote. Marvin trained, stopped using drugs, and gained 30 pounds. The Lions coach asked Marvin to practice where he ran some routes and plays. The coach thought he was good, but not great, and did not send him an invitation to training camp. This was the end of his football fantasy. I give him a lot of credit. I mean, he's trying a bunch of different things.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And I mean, he should be proud of himself for at least trying. I mean, because that really came out of left field. No pun intended.
That's baseball.
I understand that. That's why I said no pun intended.
So far, we've got pilot, acting, and now football.
Right.
And singing.
Right. But that really just equaled, potato peeler and And nothing for the football thing. Funny though that he just hangs out with guys and he kind of gets wrapped up in the moment and he goes for it, and good for him.
Marvin needed to get away from Berry Gordy, Motown, and his father, so he moved to Los Angeles. Marvin said, quote, "I was still under contract with Motown, but I was free to record wherever I wanted. I wrote the soundtrack for a movie called Trouble Man." End quote. This is said to be a project he was very proud of. He was quoted as saying, "I left behind all the constraints of Motown and in my marriage. My new life was a roller coaster ride, partying, drugs, and one-night stands. All this came to a screeching halt when he locked eyes with 17-year-old Janice Hunter in 1973 in Hollywood. He said it was love at first sight. Still writing songs about situations in his life, Janice Hunter inspired Let's Get It On. It was a song about sexual freedom written by Gaye and Ed Townsend. Let's Get It On was released in June 1973. It became and remains to this day one of Gaye's most successful singles. Janice was young, a teenager. She may have been his perfect woman, a chance to mold her into the image of his mother, charismatic, caring, and loving. His mother was the standard in which he gauged his relationships with his wives.
Well, first off, she's a minor and he's like twice her age. That's kind of gross.
He actually was twice her age. He was 34 years old.
That's too big a difference.
Even though he was still married to Anna, Marvin and Janice moved to a cabin high up in Topanga Canyon in the hope of escaping the constant public life. At the same time, Marvin bought his parents the home on Gramercy Place in Los Angeles. He was trying to focus on a normal life with Janice, but with the huge success of Let's Get It On, he had to go back on tour. Back to the life he thought he escaped, and the temptations were overwhelming. Marvin said, quote, "They wanted me to jump out there and shake my booty just like a teenager all over again. I just wanted to be alone with Jan. Touring always tears at my gut. I do enough drugs in ordinary life, but on the road, quantities triple. And then I have to act like every woman's lover so they'll go out and buy 3 more copies of my latest record. What kept me going was having children of my own with Janice, something Anna was never able to give me. They were more important than money and so-called status." End quote. Janice Hunter said that Marvin did have family values, distorted, but they were there. Remember, growing up, his family was dysfunctional, so he wanted to do his best to create a normal family life. Since they were both addicted to drugs and alcohol, it made it hard. But on September 4th, 1974, they had a daughter named Nona. A year later, they welcomed a son named Frankie Christian. On November 16th, 1975. Marvin's life continued to be tormented, still singing, still fighting the inner demons warring in his head, but bearing his soul in his music also resonated with everyone and what was going on in their own lives. In November 1975, Anna Gaye filed for divorce. A year and a half later, and after 14 years, on May 4th, 1977, they were divorced, something Marvin says he's been waiting for. Janice and Marvin were married in October 1977. Well, I imagine after 2 kids and living with someone else, she figured it was kind of over.
And yeah, you mean 2 kids with pretty much another kid herself. And why did his first wife wait so long to file for divorce?
I have no idea.
That's weird.
The court ordered Marvin to pay all the royalties made off his next album to Anna as her settlement. So he wrote and recorded Here, My Dear. This was released in December 1978. The songs were about his marriage to Anna, which she was furious about, and even though it received positive reviews, the sales weren't great. Due to the lack of success, Marvin refused to promote it, along with Motown stopping promoting it in early 1979.
You know, I can't believe she agreed to royalties from an album after the divorce. I mean, that really wasn't very smart of her, and it was pretty genius of him to make it about her and call it Here, My Dear. Hilarious.
And actually, I thought when he made it, when I was reading about it, I thought when he made it, it was kind of like he's going to make a not so great album so it doesn't sell that much so that, she doesn't get that much. But then later on, I saw that he was actually disappointed it didn't do well, and he stopped promoting it.
Oh, I was with you with your first thoughts. We were on the same page there. I can't believe he thought it would do well.
The irony of it is later on, and I don't know what year, but they re-released it or something happened with it, and it actually did pretty well after the fact, years later.
I'm going to have to look it up. I want to hear the songs now.
Mm-hmm.
A bitter Marvin.
Right. Marvin began to spiral and had gone into self-imposed exile, causing his relationship with Janice to crumble. They separated in 1979. At the end of the 70s, his first marriage to Anna was over, and he was arguing with Janice, his second wife. She wasn't able to live up to his expectations he had put on her. He is in full despair, still addicted to cocaine, owes money to the IRS, but he runs out of money, so he decides to go to Hawaii. He ends up living in a van.
Wow, didn't see that one coming. Can you imagine being just a regular old beach bum and the bum next to you is Marvin Gaye?
Well, I imagine it probably needed to just get away from everything, and, that's the most relaxed place to go.
Yeah, those bums there got it made. Okay, that's the best place to be if you're going to beach bum.
Okay, I don't know if they have a real estate agent for that, but okay. While in Hawaii, a promoter from England named Jeffrey Kruger offered to take him back to England to help clean him up and get him back on tour. Kruger said, quote, "I flew over to see Marvin. We had to track him down through his drug dealers, which we did. And he was in shock to see me when I saw him again. He lost a lot of weight, told me he hadn't eaten, hadn't even washed, which was so unlike Marvin because he was a very sharp character," end quote. Marvin started touring in England, with the highlight of the tour a command performance for Princess Margaret. It was a wonderful evening, with the exception of Marvin's performance. It was about 10:30 and the princess left without any signs of Marvin. He did not show up until about 10:40. The entire audience was gone, and unsteadily he sits at the piano and wants to know when the show is going to start. Kruger told him, quote, "I said there's a cleaner, you can sing to her. We're going." And that's exactly what happened, end quote. All the headlines the next day read, "Marvin Gaye snubs royal family."
Now there's a lasting impression.
1980 rolled around, and Marvin had finished his tour in Britain.
Did that even really count as a tour?
There was more to it. That was just the highlight.
Well, that is going to be the highlight, though, so forget the rest of it.
Wow, you're vicious. Once again, he hit rock bottom. He's developed a serious dependence on cocaine. He contacted Freddie Coussart, who was a club owner and concert promoter. Coussart persuaded Marvin to come live with him and his family in Ostend, Belgium. He stayed with them for several months, working out, going to church, avoiding drugs, and even did some performing in Ostend.
Well, he's really a lucky man to have so much support when he is his very own worst enemy.
You said a lot right there.
Yep.
He sabotages a lot. In much better shape, he agrees to do a biography. David Ritt's biographer meets up with him in Belgium. Ritz goes to Marvin's apartment, and sitting there right on the coffee table are books of S&M pornography. Still struggling with his demons, Ritz remembers telling him, quote, "Marvin, what you need is sexual healing, not sexual pain." And he says to me, "What does that mean?" I said, "The love of one woman who would love you for you being you," end quote. Marvin is quoted as saying, "I love that idea, write a poem." So Ritz did, and that was the beginning of the song Sexual Healing. Ritz actually wasn't credited for writing the song, but he did sue Marvin and the record company, which I believe they settled after Marvin passed away. And he did receive credit for writing the song, but no money. And the only reason he received the credit was because he had recordings of Marvin telling him that he loved his poem.
I'm surprised he didn't receive any money for it then, and I'm going to listen to that song in a whole new way now.
That's what I read, that he didn't receive any money.
Interesting.
And maybe because it was after he passed away. There wasn't a lot left.
Yeah, maybe.
While Marvin was out of the country, his second wife, Janice, filed for divorce, which was finalized in 1981. And for the second time, he had a failed marriage. Sexual Healing had become a huge hit, and in April 1982, CBS Records bought Marvin's contract from Motown. He flew back to LA and immediately went back on tour. Marvin said, quote, "I needed the love of my fans and a paycheck too," end quote.
Don't we all?
Love of the fans or paycheck?
Both.
When it came to touring, things hadn't changed. His drug addiction came back in full swing. But this time, backstage was different. He had 2 rooms. One had a preacher, and the other had his cocaine dealer. David Ritz said, quote, "This is sort of a metaphor that became the literal condition of his life. God in one room, the devil in the next. The war continued and continued," end quote.
Now that's a real mind screw. I wonder if the two knew about each other.
It would be interesting.
It would be very interesting to know.
Can you imagine the preacher trying to preach to the drug dealer, telling him to get out of the business? This was Marvin's last tour, and a couple of things were happening. First, he felt like he had to give more and more of himself sexually, and sadly, it ended up being a demonstration of him stripping down to his underwear while performing. Second, due to the continued use of cocaine, he became extremely paranoid and believed someone was out to kill him. After his tour ended in August 1983, Marvin returned home to his mother and father's house, thinking that maybe he'd be safe there. His sister-in-law said, quote, "Marvin wanted to see her," his mother, "because I think he needed to feel he was loved. I went over to the big house and I said, 'Marvin, why are you crying?' And he said, 'Because nobody loves me,'" end quote.
Now that is tragic.
And that's what he thought. I honestly believe it was all the drugs because everybody loved him.
Exactly. It had to be the drugs, just distorting all of his thoughts.
For the next 6 months, his depression was growing. His second wife would not let him anywhere near the children, which completely destroyed him and broke his heart. His use of cocaine was steadily increasing. Marvin had taken to walking around just in his bathrobe, carrying a loaded .38 revolver in his pocket. There had been continued traffic going in and out of the house, some friends, some dealers. His father was losing his patience. Marvin and his father had always had a power struggle, and now that Marvin is the one bringing the money into the household, it becomes a matter of who is the head of the household.
That must have been an all-out war.
I don't know if I would have wanted to be under that household. And the poor mother, she always tried to, buffer the two of them.
Yeah, that's really sad for her.
His mother had always been the peacemaker in the family. She would be the middle between them and referee their differences. But his father knew that Marvin and his mother had a special closeness. His father was jealous of their relationship and Marvin's success. This was a lifelong conflict between him and Marvin. Things didn't improve over time. Marvin had amassed a huge amount of debt. He owed millions in taxes and hundreds of thousands in alimony to his ex-wives. His assets were seized to pay these debts, and his father was afraid that the Gramercy house was in jeopardy as well. Another source of contention between him and his son. The morning of April 1st, 1984, Marvin's sister-in-law, Irene, brought his mother breakfast. She had been in bed recuperating from surgery, but his mother asked Irene to take the breakfast to Marvin. This was seen by his father, which didn't sit well with him. Irene goes into Marvin's room and she notices that he doesn't look well. As he wakes up, he is in physical and mental pain. His body is shattered from years of cocaine use. Irene says, quote, "He looked absolutely wiped there. He looked like he hadn't slept for days. He just looked tired. It was almost like he just wanted to give up," end quote. It's late morning and Marvin's father is fed up with his son's drug use, his paranoia, and the constant parade of people going in and out. He starts to become frustrated and angry because he can't find some important business papers. He goes to Marvin's room and erupts, screaming at him about everything going on, and where are these papers? Marvin has flashes of his life growing up, the violence, what he has endured with his father his whole life. Marvin strikes his father for the first time in his life. His father falls to the floor and Marvin kicks him. His mother comes in and calms the situation, but it's too late. His father gets up, humiliated, angry, betrayed by the lack of respect, and leaves the room.
I'm sorry, but you know what? And I know it's his father and he should respect him, but that guy didn't deserve a lot of respect, in my opinion.
But again, it's still, I'm the head of the household. You're my son. You do what I say. Still that mentality.
Still that mentality, but I mean, this is a house Marvin bought for him and pays all the bills in. I mean, so it's just all in his head, you know?
It was what it was.
I mean, not to say that's an excuse for Marvin to hit his father. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, this guy's really getting off on being the king of his castle. It's not even his own castle.
His father returns with a gun, the same gun Marvin had bought him for protection, points it at Marvin, and shoots him twice, once in the shoulder and once in the chest.
I remember seeing this on the news, and I was shocked, along with the rest of the world, that he was shot by his own father.
You just don't think of something like that happening.
No.
Marvin's brother and sister-in-law that lived next door heard what they thought were shots, but dismissed it because they lived by a freeway and thought it was backfire from a car. Until they heard Marvin's mother screaming in the front yard. She's telling them that Marvin's been shot. His brother runs into the house and into Marvin's room. He's still alive. He holds him and yells for his wife to call 911. The paramedics arrive in under 10 minutes, but refuse to go into the house while there's still a gun in there. Marvin's sister-in-law goes in and cautiously looks for father. She finds him in his bedroom sitting on the bed. She asks him, "Where's the gun?" He calmly looks at her and says, "What gun?"
Oh, geez. Talk about hard-hearted.
He was in shock, too, I would imagine.
I think he was just hard. I don't think he was in shock at all. I think he was already trying to cover his tracks.
Marvin's sister-in-law begins to go through the drawers, looking everywhere when she notices the gun under the pillow. She takes it and runs out. While still in his brother's arms, the paramedics come in, a full 20 minutes after they arrive. They get him into an ambulance and race to the hospital, but Marvin died on the way. Marvin passed away at 1:01 p.m. on April 1st, 1984, the day before his 45th birthday.
So those 20 minutes after his father was hiding the gun could have saved his life. His dad was selfish to the end, if you ask me.
And I really did wonder if they would have gotten him in the ambulance. I mean, within 5 minutes, could his life have been saved? And you're right. That goes beyond selfish.
Yeah, he's sitting in a room for, all that time while his son is dead or dying. He doesn't even know because he doesn't bother to check on him, and he's just hiding a gun.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan, if you can't tell.
I don't think many people are. Many people believe that Marvin wanted to die. All the drug use in his life had taken its toll, and he just couldn't go on. That he knew by striking his father what the outcome might be. I brought you into this world, and I will take you out. On September 20th, 1984, Marvin Gaye Sr. pleaded no contest to a voluntary manslaughter charge. He was sentenced on November 2nd, 1984, to a 6-year suspended sentence and 5 years probation.
I know he's older by this time, but that is truly shocking how he did no time for this. The whole thing is such a tragedy, and his dad belongs in jail.
I think that the defense for it was self-defense, because he hit him and he kicked him. I think that's the way they headed.
Well, you don't bring a gun to a fist fight.
True, but he felt like maybe if he didn't do something, Marvin might have killed him because he's walking around with a gun in his robe.
No, I think this was just like you said before, them just fighting over who's the king of the castle. That's what I think me personally, I think that's what this boils down to.
And I think as far as his father goes, in his brain, that's what it was.
Yeah.
But of course, you don't want to say that in court, basically.
And in his father's head, it's like he won. He's the last man standing.
It's funny you say that. I was looking at it the other way, that Marvin's like, okay, you know what? I'm done with life. You're going to have to kill me. It was looked at both ways. Quote, I look back on my defeats and my problems and all the things I can sink into depression about. I can also look back and I can think of all the blessings I've had and my blessings actually outweigh all the negative things that have occurred in my life. And it's that fact that makes me happiest of all. I know somebody loves me. End quote. Marvin Gaye.
Wow. Thank you for bringing this story to us. There was a lot of information in there I knew nothing about, and it was very interesting and really sad.
It was sad. He did have some wonderful things in his life, but I think in some level he was his own worst enemy as well.
Absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening. Don't forget to take care, have fun, and let your grimaginations run wild.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. We just want to thank you all for sharing your time with us. And if you'd like to send in your creepy little grim bits, we would love to hear your personal stories, interests, and suggestions. Please email them to grimwitwithdimwits@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram at grimwitwithdimwits, Twitter at grimwitwithdimwits, and Facebook, Grimwit with Dimwits. Join us every Monday for new episodes, and feel free to share us with your grim-loving friends.
We would really appreciate if you would take a minute to rate and review. 5-star ratings go a long way and would really help us out. Until then, we would love it if you'd come back next week to delve with us into the strange and unusual things we just can't wrap our skulls around.